Yeah, well, let's dig in. Hello, everybody. I'm David Cooks, and I tell you what, we know that paralysis can take on many forms. It can be physical, like mine. It can be
do anything you put your mind to.
And what we try to do is feature stories that go from difficult places to fulfilling purpose.
What seems impossible can be done by you.
We're going to be speaking with Kevin Cekanor today.
She stopped me and said, excuse me. And she's basically asking the question, like, why are you here? And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, your parents should have basically aborted you as a baby.
Got so much to give, a lot of life to live. You must go from paralysis to purpose.
Well, I got my pen here.
Yeah.
I'm taking notes.
Paralysis to purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks, and you're going to hear it again. I have the best job in the world. I get to interview some of the most inspiring and intriguing people on the planet. And today today is no exception at all. We're going to be speaking with Kevin Cekanor today. Kevin is a speaker. He's an author. He's a photographer. He's a disability advocate. And I met Kevin when he was in 7th grade, I believe, and he came to our basketball camp when I was the head coach at Marquette High School. His story is amazing. I'm excited to interview him today and share this with the world. So, Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. You know, I'm gonna always call you Coach Cook, so I'm happy to be here and excited. So let's do it.
I appreciate the coach part. That's all good. I failed to mention in the intro that you also are a world-class athlete. And we want to talk about the role that sports has played in your life, about your family, and of course, we're going to go down that road of paralysis to purpose. And yours, I think, is very unique. Let's just start with the fact that you're a little person. And when I first met you in 7th grade, I really didn't care what your physical stature was. You were coming to camp to learn and grow and be a part of the camp. So I just threw you in with everybody else and said, make sure everybody passes to each other and have fun. So let's start with the beginning of when we met, and then we'll talk about your family and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. Like you said, I think from the start, I look physically different than a lot of people, but I mean, hey, we all got those physical differences. Like you said, I was blessed to be born with something called achondroplasia dwarfism. A little person with short stature. Any of those, things to describe me can be used. But at the end of the day, also, I love just being called Kevin. And so, like you said, jumped in 7th grade into your basketball camp, kind of with the same mentality that my parents always gave me from the start, which was, you're going to do whatever you want to do, whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve it. Your unique difference in dwarfism is not going to stop you from that. And so that's kind of where I came when I came to that Marquette High camp. And like you said, too, it was, basketball was a deep passion of mine growing up. And so when I walked in that day and, that first opportunity, it was really a culmination of what I've been taught, which was, Kevin, use your talents. One of those talents for me was basketball, was sports. And so it was like an opportunity to kind of prove myself out on the court, prove that I can, stick with the big boys, so to speak. And, but really, you and I were talking about this before, walking into camp, it was an opportunity for me to step outside my comfort zone. But for seeing you in your role, like you said, immediately made me feel comfortable in who I was as an individual walking into a new situation. And so really in that opportunity, it was a great first learning of you got to be comfortable in your own skin, and there's going to be other people around you who are ultimately going to help you get to that. So
absolutely
a lot there, but hey, it was a start to a great relationship that, now we're coming back to this day. So
it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And you said something that I think we need to just go back and talk about. And you said, you can just call me Kevin. And I think in this world of diversity now, we've got the language is changing and you don't even know what to say. You're afraid to say things. And I think that the ultimate respect that we can show any person is to call them by their name. And I think that's a great point for our listeners to understand, is that I don't want you to identify me by what I look like. I want you to identify me by who I am and call me by my name, because that builds self-esteem. And I think that when you are different or you have challenges, self-esteem becomes a really important part of your life. When did you first know that you were different? When did you know that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like, I've gotten that before, and I don't think I could really pinpoint a specific time where I was like, I know exactly that I'm different. I think honestly, from the start, actually I do know. Probably it was kindergarten. So my mom, basically came into my kindergarten class, first day of class, right? Excited, like new opportunity, new school. And then your mom decides to come and crash the party. But really, like, she crashed the party, and I'm so glad that she did, because in that day, she basically came to my class to just explain what dwarfism was, explain kind of like, the physical differences that I do experience, but it almost broke the ice, and like made something that is like the elephant in the room not so big and not so uncomfortable, and made it in a way that kids could ask the questions, be curious. Because I think that's a big thing I'd love to touch on too. It's okay to be curious about difference, like have the curiosity to ask those questions, and I encourage people to ask questions. So I think that really helped me to understand that difference is not something to hide away from, but it's something to really own and accept as a unique part of who you are as an individual. So really, I think that first day of kindergarten was when I started to realize, okay, maybe I am a little different, but that doesn't mean anything else, or it doesn't define who I am, right?
You're different, but you're no less.
Exactly. Different than no less. It's just a characteristic of who I am. Just some, it's the same thing as I have blonde hair, someone else has, blue eyes, right? Something like that. So,
yep.
And now that we're on this point too, one of the things I would love to just talk about is, I think I experience this in the daily life where, I'm going to the grocery store, and it's so easy for a parent with a child nowadays to, the child will say something, the child will point something out about you. And the parent will then kind of hush them, right? Or shush them away and be like, no, don't talk about that. Don't talk about that individual in that way. And I think it's, it's out of embarrassment. They don't know how to react. They don't know how to interact. But when we start to kind of bring that mindset into the world where like you're almost being scolded or shushed for asking questions or being curious, then we kind of have to reevaluate who we are. And so like, I just want to say that now, like if you're in a grocery store, you're a parent listening or something like that, like encourage your kids to ask those questions, like step up and ask, because you don't know what you don't know.
I know that we live in an age where everybody's very sensitive right now. And
yep.
And so they don't know if you would be offended that someone asked you a question or how you're going to respond. But I think it's worth taking that risk, because if you get the right answer from the right person, it will change the perception that person may have about people that are green with polka dots for the rest of their life.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Well, basketball wasn't your only sport. There was soccer. And I know you really loved soccer as well. You ended up coming to Marquette High School, and Marquette High School has one of the top soccer programs, boys soccer programs in the country. And I know you wanted to be a part of that. How did that work out for you?
It was an interesting sport because soccer, you need speed, and obviously I wasn't the fastest. So I spent my entire soccer career, so to speak, focusing on what I could do and not necessarily what I couldn't do. And so that was like, I'm going to be the best passer that I could be. So I stepped into that role. And really anything and everything I did, I made sure when I got the ball at my feet, I was going to give you the best pass possible. I was going to lead you, to where you needed to be on the field. And so focusing on that, I really stepped into that position and role and fell in love with the sport even more. But as I got older, I started to then realize, okay, there's a point where, Kevin, like your physical difference is going to prohibit you from participating in the way that you want to participate. And so that kind of came to a head right when I got to high school. And like you said, going to Marquette, it's pretty intimidating to want to play soccer and be part of that program, as we're one of the top dogs in the nation. And so I going into my freshman year, that summer, I was going to try out, and I was, you know what, I was going to be like, screw it, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try to get it. Probably not going to make it, but at least I tried, right? And it was always that trying mentality that I had as a kid. But I specifically remember first day of tryouts, there was something I always struggled with too, growing up, physically different. And it came out of fear. And so fear and self-doubt was kind of really the biggest disability that I have fought in my life. Not necessarily my dwarfism, but it's what kind of the effects that it had personally on me. And not even to the point where like other people would say things to me. It was, these own thoughts were just about me. Like they creeped into my head. And so that day, fear and self-doubt really came back and attacked pretty hard. And so I was sitting on the kitchen floor in my house day one of tryouts, and we were about to get ready to go to the fields, and I broke down for my mom, and I'm like, Mom, like, I'm not doing this. Like, I had all this belief that I could go try out, be this great individual, and then all of a sudden I stopped and I cried and I panicked, and I was like, I quit. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And she looked me in the eyes that day, and she literally said, Kevin, like, you have two choices right now. Like, you could let fear stop you from, you know, stepping into what your purpose might be, and almost be frozen in time, have a certain type of paralysis, right? And sit on that floor and continue to pout. Or you can go and adapt and, you know, find a different way to still participate in the sport that you love. And so that whole idea of adapting, it hit me there. And so what I did was, you know, I didn't try out that day, but what I did do is I reached out to Coach Lawrence, the head soccer coach there, who I'd started to build a connection with, and just told him, and frankly, I was honest with him. I was like, I want to play soccer. I know I can't play in the way that I think I can, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to be part of the program. And so that day he worked with me to find opportunities to be part of the soccer program. And so from freshman year to senior year, I became a kind of a player, coach, and manager. And so I took on more of a manager role with the team, and still got to participate, ended up winning the state championship with the team my senior year. But really that opportunity sitting on the kitchen floor changed my life, and it could have gone in two different paths. It could have gone down a path of soccer is something that I no longer participate in. It could have stopped being part of my life, or it could almost step me further into a purpose. And so that's what it did that day, by, you know, taking on that new role. So it's all about, sometimes it's shifting your mindset. It's having other people help shift your mindset with you. But really it's how you react to situations. And so that's what it taught me that day.
Well, you know, what a mature response for a freshman.
Yeah.
You're a freshman, and you go and you determine that you've got this passion, and somehow you're going to pursue it, even if it means it's not what you exactly wanted to do. And do you think that people who have differences and challenges growing up, do they mature differently than others, or faster? Because that's amazing that you were able to articulate that. Go see the head coach and give him an option to have you be a part of what they're doing.
Yeah. I think you're challenged, and definitely to maybe mature. Yeah, definitely mature faster. But a lot of the times I think it's almost more difficult to sometimes step into those situations more and more, because I think you step out and you're immediately like, you're already physically, I keep going back to physical, but like, you're already different, right? And so if you make a mistake, it's almost like magnified to even more of an extent. And so it's challenging, but like the more you do it, the more you step out, the more you realize like you have to mature, or you have to adapt. For me, it's like, I go back to the analogy, like every day, like I have to live kind of with a step stool in hand, right? Like I have to like literally like figuratively and literally, like I had like going to the grocery store, right? Like sometimes I can't reach something off the shelf, right? And For me, it's like, all right, I have to find ways to get around that situation and almost think differently, think outside the box. So long story short, I think being physically different for me has made me think outside the box, but think in more of a creative way, and be more creative in a sense. So I would definitely say it makes you mature, but it provides a little spice to your life, provides a little fun. So.
A little spice. Okay, you can call it spice. I want to talk a little bit about your family for a moment. Then I want to get back to internationally what you did with soccer. How did you have an older brother, I believe, and so it's four of you with your mom and dad. How did and you're the only little person in your family. How did that impact your family, or your older brother?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So growing up in a family where I was the only one that was different from everyone else, I think it definitely played a role on how my parents interacted with us as siblings. We were both really complete opposites in a lot of senses. So for me, I was, loved soccer, loved basketball, loved all the athletics. And he has a brilliant mind and very intellectual, diving into the books. He was in debate and in theater. And so from day one, I think it was very unique in that we both had different interests. And so, both my parents tried to balance that. But at the end of the day, too, I think it was difficult that being different, their attention is put on you more without even realizing it. And so as I got older, a lot of the things we did, trips we went to in the summer, all evolved around like Little People of America conferences or conventions with other dwarfs and going to dwarf athletic sports. And to the point where sometimes I think that left my brother in the background. And so it's a challenge. And for me, I didn't realize the effects that it might have on his and I's relationship until I got older. And, we talk about this, but it's like, you're being physically different. You're provided a lot from others. And so like, the moment where you're kind of left on your own or you're not given those opportunities anymore, you're like, oh crap, like now what? And so like, you have to kind of fight for yourself. And now realizing it, that's how my brother felt a lot, probably because he was almost fighting for himself or being on his own.
And I think sometimes people don't understand that the family goes through the journey. It's just not the individual that has the challenges. The entire family is impacted by this. The great thing about what you just said is that you and your brother talk about it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back with Kevin Cekanor. We'll get back to my conversation with this week's guest in just a minute on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. This is David Cooks. And if I was going to release a greatest hits CD from season 1, this next story would definitely make the cut. My guest, Jose Flores, was born with a form of muscular dystrophy. Here he recalls an event that became a key turning point in his life: his high school graduation ceremony.
That whole time I'm getting dressed, like I mentioned in high school, was when this condition started kicking in. So, and my leg would give out at me at random moments. I'd be at the mall, the movie theaters, at the park, hanging out, and my leg would just give out and I'd fall on the floor. And that'd be like a spectacle. Like everybody was like, or laughing or pointing at me or like, ha, 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 it was a horrible experience. And so my mom takes me to the school. She drops me off so she could go get parking. I got to go line up with everyone else. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time while I'm home, on the way over there, and while I'm there, I'm thinking to myself, oh God, please don't let my leg give out on me today. If any day my leg was going to give out on me, Lord, please not let it be today. So I'm like, oh man, I get to the bottom of the hill and I'm going real slow, making sure I get my footing. I get to the bottom of the hill and I'm like, whoo, man, thank God I made it, baby. Yeah, we here. And so they start calling your names and, the names of everyone, and you start moving forward. You marching forward, right? With everyone else waiting for your name to be called. And I'm thinking to myself the whole time, oh God, please don't let my leg fall. There's too many people here. I don't want to be embarrassed. And so they call my name, right? They calling the names Jose Flores. So I'm going up and I'm going across the stage. And right when I get like maybe 6 or 7 feet away from the principal, my leg gives out, bro. My leg gives out and I fall on the floor. And it was something that you only see in the movies, brother. And it's like, you hear everybody gasp. They're like, and it goes like a deafening silence. And I'm like, and it's like slow motion. I'm looking around at everyone. Like I'm looking slow motion and I'm thinking to myself, man, I'm like, God, this did not just happen to me. And I'm on the floor, man, and I'm having a conversation in my mind. And there's two conversations I'm having. I'm hearing one voice that's saying, man, Jose, just play like you're hurt, fake it, and let the paramedics come get you up out of here so you don't have to deal with the scrutiny. You don't have to deal with the chitter chatter or the talking or the laughing or the pointing. And you'll get your diploma, man. You graduated. They'll send it to you in the mail. And I'm on the floor, man, and I'm having this conversation and it feels like an eternity while I'm on the floor, but it's literally a couple seconds, maybe a minute or so. And so I'm having this other conversation and it's telling me, Jose, are you out of your freaking mind? You better get your behind back up and you better go and get what you worked for. You better go get what you've earned. You worked so hard for this. You're at the finish line and you're thinking about giving up. You better get up and go get what's yours.
That's the mindset disruptor, Jose Flores, from last season on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. The story doesn't end there, so be sure to check out the rest of our conversation in the episode entitled, Am I Damaged Goods? Okay, it's time for part 2 of today's episode with my guest, Kevin Cekanor. Welcome back to Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast. I'm your host, David Cooks. Today, we are honored to have Kevin Cekanor with us. And let's pick up where we left off with with the role of athletics in your life. I want you to talk briefly about how athletics helped you in terms of leveling the playing field, rather, and also for your own self-esteem and that kind of stuff. And then I want you to talk about, we talked already about what you ended up doing in high school, but then you did something at the same time while you were in high school with soccer.
Yeah. So for me with sports, it definitely was that provider of self-esteem, a sense of belonging, right? They give you a sense of you belong to a team. And so everyone loves to be part of a team. And so I saw it. That's where I belonged. It was on the field, on the court. And it really went back to the idea that I didn't feel like I was so different when I was on the field or on the court. And so that's why I love sports, and it gave me that competitive edge, something that, I've always loved to do. And ultimately too, growing up, being a little person, you're always concerned, I think, about physical health. I grew up in a setting where when you go to these Little People of America conventions every year, there's some little people who are extremely overweight and so obese and have difficulties, just frankly because honestly we don't have a lot of space to put the weight. Right. So growing up and seeing that and seeing how other people were, that was always in the back of my head. And so I always wanted to pursue a life of activity. And it did get toxic at times because it became almost a need and a way to be like, to make sure I was okay. Right. And so like it brought on certain triggers and things, but it all came back to that self-doubt, physical appearance, all that. But really sport was this healthy side of it for me to pursue. And so I pursued sport with kind of my everyday, what I did at home. But like you said as well, sport was super important to me with this organization called the Dwarf Athletic Association of America. And so every summer I would compete in a variety of sports, from basketball to soccer to volleyball to badminton, traveling the country and even traveling the world, competing. But it was the most important thing was I was competing against people my size for once. Mm-hmm. So rather than, being the seventh man on the bench on a normal sense, I was fortunate to be one of the star players, but it just felt like for once you were seen, loved, and heard for who you were and could actually play against other people your size and dominate on the court or dominate on the field. And so growing up, it was great because in high school, for example, I had soccer. I could participate at Marquette High, but I knew by continuing with Marquette High, I was continuing for a reason just beyond what I was doing at the high school. You know, it was training me, it was molding me into what I was able to do in the summertime. And so like being able to still play and compete gave me almost a better edge when I did actually then go and play in Argentina or go play, you know, in the World Dwarf Games and represented Team USA in soccer. And so I always had the sport and always had something to work towards, even if, hey, in the current present moment, it was a challenge because I wasn't able to necessarily play in the high school level, but still have the sport around to be able to participate. So
I remember when I went to college to Whitewater, and it was one of the most accessible schools in the country. And so there was always transportation, elevators, ramps, curb cuts, automatic doors. Everything was perfect, and which was great. And also helped build your self-esteem and your ability to be independent and those types of things. But then I graduated, and the world was a much different place than that. How did you transition from, I mean, it's interesting. You understood that you had some limitations that would prevent you from competing at Marquette High, but then you had this other group that really made you feel like you were the man. And then when that ends, I mean, how do you deal with like the real world?
The world, it's a scary place. That's for sure. And I don't think I dealt with it as well as maybe I could have. And it goes back to almost what we talked about with my brother and I and my family. It was like for so long, I was provided what I needed. And so then being pushed out into the real world, it was like, oh crap, like, let's see if Kevin sinks or swims. And I'm not a good swimmer, so I definitely sunk, that's for sure. But no, like it almost like it was faking it till you make it for me. And for the longest time, even with this idea, and we talked about it, this quote I live by, it's making a difference with your difference. And so it's this belief that, you know, we are all born different, whether we accept our differences or we don't accept them. I firmly believe that we're given them for a specific reason, and we're given them from God, for me. And that's, you know, he gave us these gifts and these opportunities to step into them. And once we take that leap, that's when we ultimately make a difference in this world. And so from high school on, I was preaching that, I was pushing that out, to everyone I saw, right? Make a difference with your difference, make a difference with your difference. And as I got older, I started to realize, Kevin, like, I don't even believe that, like, you don't even believe that yourself. Like, I am like basically trying to rah-rah everyone else up, and I can't even rah-rah myself up. Right. And so like, it hit me that, growing up, I became almost more aware of my differences and appearances and what those basically the demons they brought inside of me, which was, I go back to that fear. That fear is huge for me. And so it literally, like, leaving high school, going into college, leaving college, it put me in a sense of paralysis to the point where I didn't necessarily know what to do and where to turn, who to turn to, and spent so much time in my head that I frankly missed out on a lot of life, I feel like, in the last, 5 to 7 years, like, just because I spend so much time in my head. And the crazy thing is I put on this exterior positivity, positive image.
I wrote a book called Getting Undressed: From Paralysis to Purpose. What was your getting undressed moment?
When everything was basically taken away from me was the moment that I started to believe, once again, who I was and who I was meant to be. And when I say everything was taken away from me, after graduating from Xavier University, I moved up to Cleveland, Ohio to work for Goodyear on the brand marketing team. And so working for the first year after college, great, right? And then March 2020 hits. We all know that month. And so really, unfortunately, I was furloughed from my job. And so I had first moved to this new city, started to make this place my own home, had a lot of challenges in doing that, and started to actually feel like I was putting these pieces into place and maybe starting to find a purpose. And I guess God was like, nope, you're still working on it. And so he's like, I got to take some things away from you to help you even realize that even more. And so in March of 2020, I was furloughed for 3 months, and basically went home. And so I didn't realize that I had put so much of my identity already in my job, or feeling like that was my purpose in life. And so like this was only 8 months out of college or whatever, right? Like not even a year. And I'm like, holy cow, like if this is what it's going to be like for the next 45 years of my life, like the moment that something is taken away, swept under your feet, the ground shakes, and I'm not built on a sturdy foundation, there's going to be problems. And so that 3 month was building myself up again on a sturdy foundation, which was the rock, which was God for me, which was diving back into trying to find out who I was as an individual. So every day not having work, I was like, I'm going to use this time to build myself up. And what I did was I wrote. I started to journal. I started to write my thoughts, my daily thoughts. I've always had these thoughts. You know, when you spend a lot of time in your head, you get some good thoughts. You definitely get some good thoughts. It's just, you got to write them down at some point. And so I started just to write them down in a book. And a lot of them came from verses I would read in scripture, just books. And so I would journal. And so in 3 months, realized I had wrote a story basically of my life and what my life had been like and what it was currently. And they're raw, real human emotions. And but really when I started to sit with that and sit with how exactly I felt and not necessarily just push them to the side, was when I started to find my purpose and started to find my voice, and started to find who I was as an individual. And really the voice is a central part of who I am. And so that's where I'm kind of on this journey now. It's how are you going to use your voice, Kevin? Like you've always said, making a difference with your difference. You've spoken that into existence. Now it's time for you actually to believe it and use it in a way to help get other people to wake up, get out of their fear, get out of their own way, and kind of let God do the work for them.
Well, I had a chance to sample one of your Kev shorts on social media, and the one that you did was God breaks the rules. I think God is a rule breaker.
Yep.
And it was so powerful. There's a couple things. Literally, your voice. You know, I don't know if you understand this, but you have a very unique voice that has depth to it and can, I think, reach people. Just listening to that recording, I was like, man, where did he do this? Does he have a studio somewhere? This is really good. And then the content was crazy. So, you know, the Kev Shorts is something that you're doing as a writer that ultimately will be a book for you. And the shorts, you know, you use all the.
Yeah, you got to use all the puns. You got to throw them out there. So, and I'm sure someone's listening to it right now and they're like, short, and then it's going to click. So,
yeah, because you know what? I didn't get it. I just thought it was a short essay, you know, but no, you got to help me a little bit. So you've got that going on, which is great. You've kind of come to identify your voice. And then you have something else. And this is what I love. You've got many things going on. You're a photographer.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 4'5" photographer, what that means, what you're doing, why you call it that, and where you're going to be going with that as well.
Let's do it. It's crazy. I think before we even start that, like, the gifts that you have in life and what you're given are a lot of the times the things that you run away from for so long. And so it's crazy for me. I think photography was another gift, another passion that I had in the back of my mind, but always ran away from it. And so growing up, my family they were big into photos. And so my uncle on my mom's side and my grandma kind of led the charge in that. And so there was this running joke wherever any family gathering we had, my grandma was always like, we're going to keep taking photos, family portraits, until we finish the reel, right? And so with the old Kodak film cameras, everyone was rolling their eyes, you know, sitting in front of the Christmas tree. And we would keep taking photos, the same photo over again until we finished the reel. And so it was that same idea and that same mentality my uncle had too. He was a big traveler, and loved to travel the world. And wherever he went, he always had a camera with him. And so growing up and seeing those two important people in my life, I was like, you know what, photography is pretty cool. Like there's a reason why like life is literally too short to not capture its moments. And so they really took that on. And so I wanted to potentially pursue that as well. And unfortunately, I just never did. I always was like, oh, I'm not good enough to be a photographer again, or I'm going to buy this camera and not going to use it. Right. And so this gift came in a time again where I thought everything was taken away from me. And so what I mean by that is my uncle, was a super healthy individual, and all of a sudden, unfortunately, got a diagnosis of brain cancer. And was basically said he had stage 4 brain cancer, and a tumor. And from 2 months went from the healthiest individual to I was going to, his funeral service and his celebration of life. And to literally lose a man in that short of a time period really hit me. But he and his wife, my aunt, before he left, basically provided all his nephews and nieces a gift, and it was a monetary gift, and it was in a little red envelope. And the note said, "Do something you've always wanted to do with this, but have been almost too afraid to step into it." And for me, it was at that moment, I'm like, all right, it's photography. Like that's the first thought I had. And so I bought my first camera with that money, and that was in 2019. And since then, haven't stopped. And so every time I shoot a photo, I have that immediate connection to him. But really, he provided me a gift beyond what he was able to provide me in his lifetime here. And so it was a great lesson in, what are you doing for other individuals? What are you doing for the next generation? But as I've stepped more into photography now, it's become such a deep passion. And like, I'm all about shooting with an upward perspective is what I call it. And so in photography too, it's interesting. Sometimes you got to get low, or you got to be low to get the best shots or the best angles. And so my physical, it goes back to being a little person. Honestly, I'm closer to the ground. And so I see the world from a different perspective. And so it's really become a unique little niche that I have in my photography. So that's why I always say shooting with an upward perspective. And it's interesting too, that in photography, when you shoot something upwards, right, at an upwards angle, it almost gives it a sense of awe, a sense of inspiration, aspiration. And so that's how I want to live life, is in a sense of awe and a sense of inspiration, right? And so everything I shoot, every subject I interact with, we all have something awe-inspiring to give to this world. And so like my photography is just a kind of an extension of that idea. We all have something awe-inspiring to give. So I love the raw, the real street photography. That's me. I'm not the portrait, get in the studio type of guy. I'm on the streets. I'm interacting with people. I'm just trying to capture the everyday moments, because those are the moments that are worth living for. Not the big things. It's always sometimes the best things happen in the smallest moments. So, right. Okay. What it's going to turn into, I don't know. It's my passion right now. I'm looking outside the window right now, and it's rainy and moody, and it's probably gonna be an awesome night. So you'll probably find me on the streets tonight. But literally for me, it's just such a deep passion to shoot and to have a photo to remember. So
there's more conversation just ahead on Paralysis to Purpose, the podcast, with David Cooks and his guest Kevin Cekanor. Have you heard? David's award-winning book, Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose, is now available as an audiobook, with David narrating his story. Here's an excerpt from Chapter 3, in which David recalls the first day he returned to high school in a wheelchair.
The day of returning to school had finally arrived. I was nervous. I was excited. I missed my friends. It was like being a freshman all over again. I sat in the kitchen, looking out the alley window, waiting for my ride. At that time, many of the mandated public accommodations for people with disabilities, including curb cuts, wheelchair lifts, etc., were not mainstream yet. Slushy Wisconsin winters also made it impractical and unsafe for me to slog to the nearest city bus stop. I waited for Care Cab, a transportation company, to arrive to take me to school. I pondered what going back to school would be like. How would I get in the building?
How would I get to the cafeteria, the bathroom, the fourth floor? As far as I could remember, there were stairs everywhere. When Care Cab finally arrived, it wasn't at all what I expected. Parked in the alley was a rusting Carolina blue station wagon with wood paneling on its sides. The driver exited the car and made his way to the back door of our house. He seemed like a nice guy, but his appearance wasn't so nice. He looked disheveled, was poorly dressed, and overweight. His reddish blonde hair and beard weren't groomed. I wasn't sure what was worse, his appearance or the vile feet and Fritos odor that sprang from the car when he opened the door. His nickname amongst my peers later became Pigpen after the Charlie Brown character. Getting picked up and dropped off from school was normal for 15-year-olds, but so was being self-conscious. I couldn't believe I had to be dropped off in an old school station wagon with a smelly driver. But despite my first impression, my driver was reliable and passionate about his job. He was always on time, and he always helped me get in and out of my house. He always made sure I made it safely to school. This was an early lesson on the importance of ability versus identity. His appearance was no indication of the work he did, nor of the impact he'd have in helping me get back into the mainstream. I wanted others to see me for who I was, and not the wheelchair I was in. So who was I to judge another based on similar criterion? The first ride to school was a bumpy one, but I made it. My first day at high school in a wheelchair was about to begin.
That was David Cooks narrating his book, Getting Undressed from Paralysis to Purpose. Get your copy of the audiobook today. Now, let's get back to David's conversation with Kevin Cekanor.
So we're just about ready to wrap up, but before we do that, you've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but what has been your most difficult time or circumstance that you've had to do?
I think there's being like on my own, literally away from my community when I moved to Cleveland. For my job was probably the most difficult 6-month period of my life, to the point where I did not necessarily know what I was going to do on some days. And so as someone who spends a lot of time in their head, I was in a space where I spent even more time in my head. And so like being away from my community and being introverted and all that, that was the biggest struggle. Like it was to the point where I wanted to move home. I wanted to be back home and with my parents. And so I think it's really any time that fear steps into my mind is when things can get a little dangerous for me, just because I don't always necessarily go back to the truths that I have built up about who God says that I am, and things of that nature. But also I think there's a realization too, that I'm going to have days, we all have days where we don't feel like we fit in or we belong in this world. And there's plenty of those, but it's how you react. And I think before we wrap up, there's a story in particular that I had that experience. And this was when I was back in high school, but I had just gotten my driver's license actually. And so I walked into a grocery store, and as the excited high school student that I was like, Mom, let me do all the chores, which was one of them was I'm going to go out and shop because I just want to go drive my car. I want to have this sense of independence. And so I had this sense of this independence. And even for someone who's a little person, driving it provided even more of a sense of independence, because like it's one of those tasks that you don't necessarily think you can do. But I got pedal extensions. And so I had this opportunity. I was like, I'm independent. I got this. Let's do it. And I walked into the grocery store. And the first thing on my mom's list was a bag of apples. And so I go and pick up the bag of apples, and I see an older lady kind of right next to me. And basically she stopped me and said, excuse me. And I was like, all right, maybe I'm going to help her out. And she's basically asking the question, like, why are you here? And I'm like, what does that mean? And she's like, your parents like should have basically like aborted you as a kid or as a baby. And so in that moment, I first of all did not know how to respond, because never felt such a lack of love from another individual. But secondly, I felt the pain for her, because you don't necessarily come out and say that about someone else if you aren't hurting yourself, or there's something that you're struggling with. And so in that moment, I had the option to basically, I could either pick up the bag of apples and continue to move forward and continue with my life, or I could really let it kind of destroy who I was as an individual. And that day I made the choice to, no matter how difficult life might be, to pick up that bag of apples and continue moving forward, because we are all on a journey. Life is a journey for a reason. And so realizing that there's going to be hard moments, there's going to be obstacles, there's going to be valleys, so to speak, but that's where all the growth happens, in the valleys. And so don't let that stop you from, pursuing your dreams and your callings, and don't let yourself stop you from pursuing your dreams and your callings. So I get in the way of myself all the time. I trip over my own feet, right? But it's to keep reminding yourself that when you have something on your heart, continue pursuing that, because that really is who you're called to be, and that's how you're going to make a difference with your difference in this world.
Wow, that's a remarkable story. That's unbelievable. You said a couple things there, and one of the things that I mentioned in my book was excuses don't stop you. Stopping is what stops you. And one of the keys to moving forward is you just can't stop. You said, you have another slogan there. Grab the bag of apples and move forward.
Yep.
Grab the bag of apples and move forward. And I think that's pretty good. The final thing, you sent me a text that I can't find right now. Something about who you partner with or something.
Yeah.
Could you? I want that to be your last statement to our audience, because I think it is a powerful one.
Well, definitely. I just pulled it up right now, and we were talking about what we were gonna talk about on this podcast, and then I sat in, was doing some reading that morning, and literally 3 words came up as I was thinking. It was partnership, paralysis, and purpose, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so the quote is, who you're in partnership with will either put you in paralysis or will put you in your purpose. So it's who you're in partnership with and what you're in partnership with will really either put you in paralysis or will put you in your purpose. And as I think about my story, sitting on that kitchen floor and waiting to go to soccer that day, or the grocery store, right? Or even when I moved to Cleveland, there's a lot of moments where I could either sit and put myself in a positive partnership with positive thoughts, or put myself in a space where I'm in a sense of paralysis and lose my sense of purpose. So it's our choice. It's really how you respond, how you react. And I hope your listeners find this meaningful and find it in a way that they're going to step into those situations where they ultimately find their purpose.
Well, absolutely. Now, if there's a company or somebody who wants to get a hold of you, you can come speak there, or they want you to do some photography for them. How do we get a hold of you?
So my photography account on Instagram is 4'5" photographer. That's my creative side of me. I'm also just on Instagram as Kevin Cekanor. That's where a lot of my, Kev shorts are starting to live. And ultimately too, going to start looking at opportunities maybe with, doing shorts on Spotify and things like that. But you can also send me an email at K and then my last name, CEKANOR@gmail.com. Pretty easy to find. So hit me up whenever you guys want. Would love to interact with you all.
Well, fantastic. I'm excited. Thank you for being with us today, Kevin. Your story is impactful. The work that you're doing is making a difference, and you are leaving a legacy, which I think is something that means a lot to you as well. Well, until we come back next time, this is David Cooks reminding you that your ability to endure is always greater than your willingness to endure.
You can do anything you put your mind to.
Thanks for tuning in to Paralysis to Purpose. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paralysis to Purpose on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. To purchase his book, visit davidcookspeaks.com. Be sure to tune in next time for more inspiring conversations with David Cooks.
One of the perspectives that was introduced to me, I think, was just like this whole thing about racism. And I think for me, like that was the first time that I sort of like had to actually grapple and sort of like understand what that actually meant. Like growing up in Uganda, like there were many, many things that defined me, but my skin color was not one of them.
Next time on Paralysis to Purpose.
I am so excited to have Catherine Namwezi with us.
And I remember like one of my reactions being, like when I had, like racism and all of that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm Black, like it was almost like this realization that, oh my goodness, I'm a Black person. I did not actually know that.
Paralysis to purpose.